This is Joan.
How are we doing, Christian?
Doing well.
Here it is.
We're doing it.
The dream has come to birth.
Yeah, we're here. We are here in our little Keene Center studios in our Brentwood campus here, doing our show. We're here for Breakthrough.
A little meeting, a little conversation was the inspiration for this. You working in the Office of Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation, myself working in the Office of Spirituality, and realizing that there's a great intersection for both the work that we do.
Yeah. I was new here. It was like my first month, and I've been here about 8 or 9 months-ish, and we ended up being office neighbors, and just in the little dialogue of me saying, hey, where's the copier? Those kinds of questions and whatnot, I started to realize, wow, there's a really wonderful connection here and the intersection. And then in that conversation, we said, hey, maybe there's an idea here for how we can break through these conversations, share these with other people in a way that could be really informational and invite others, whoever's watching this. That's the great thing about YouTube and the way that we're doing this here is that members within our CSJ community who have a familiarity with this language can jump in and have an experience, but also those who don't can get to know this and get to be part of this and invite more people to the table.
Right. And the work that you are really leading and guiding us in with justice, for people and for planet is so important. But what makes it different and the way we approach it is because it's grounded in our spirituality, and the spirituality is a way for God to break through into the world for the life and the betterment of the world. And our own spirituality for the family of Joseph, sisters, partners, associates, agrégés, is our way of relating so that all will move towards greater oneness. Not sameness, but oneness.
Yeah, that's really an important differentiation there of not being same, but being one. That all may be one, that a very important line in the history of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And I think it's important too. And it's funny, our guests for this first episode, Lisa and Sister Mary Ellen from the Federation. One of my earlier conversations of starting in this role, because the role of justice, peace, and integrity of creation is a pretty large one. And it's one when you look at it, you go, whoa, this is big. But something that Sister Mary Ellen advised me on was to remember that your role is not merely as an activist. It's more of being an organizer, but also spiritually, it's about having this maturity of understanding the greater depth of what it is that needs to be done spiritually. That ability to spiritually be engaged with the charism and the mission to take it further and then educate others gets a lot more work done. Yeah. And that's how this is here. And that's why we're here with this. Yeah.
And not too different from when we were founded in 1650 France and then reorganized after the French Revolution. We still have those types of challenges in our times, the chaos, the division, the divisiveness. And so your work of justice, peace, the integrity of creation is huge. And that's the importance of this spirituality because it gives one that discerning heart, And so how and where should we be now?
Yeah, and while the work that comes out of justice is huge, I can't do it, and people like me can't do it without the spiritual side. And that's really important because I can't show up to the field to play, so to speak, if I'm not. A lot of sports references, but if I'm not training my own ability spiritually to be able to handle it, because these topics are really, really, overwhelming. The world is in a weird spot. There's a lot of things going on, and if we're not spiritually mature enough to understand how to take that home, how to pray with that, how to enter into that, we're just going to be really down all the time.
Right. And, just a couple of years ago when we came together to really set our direction for the next 5 years, we're now 2 years into that, two important things that we said as a congregation with input from our associates, agrégés, and partners was that we recognize that our charism, spirituality, and mission is our legacy. And how are we living it out today? And then also, what is our call to prophetic justice? And within that are all of the topics that we hope to touch on and have a breakthrough with this series.
Yeah. So we're kind of, this episode here is our first episode, and our guests are Lisa and Sister Mary Ellen from the Federation, the Sisters Federation headquarters office. They're great first guests for us because they're going to give us almost like this foundation of how the congregation looks at these topics. Then the other episodes that follow are going to be hyper-focused on a topic that we'll be able to, the goal is to have a breakthrough for us as engaging in this, but then also for you as the viewer and listener to learn about a topic a little bit more, put a face to the topic, and then be able to maybe figure out a way for you to move forward and understand how you could do a little bit more. And so we'll look at this as an opportunity to engage with a topic and a person that you otherwise maybe didn't get the chance to.
Right. And also in engaging with others to see how they are. Yeah. Their own spirituality is moving them towards just ways, and to affirm that, because we know that we can't do it by ourselves, and to promote these stories and lift them up. So often our news doesn't do that. Yeah. But if we're able to lift some of this up, then that can be hope for others in the world as well.
You mean the news isn't all like rainbows and butterflies?
No, unfortunately.
What?
But I think it's important to lift up, the good work, the good trouble that people are getting into.
And also too, the good trouble, I like it. And also too, like media wise too, and that's another part of it too, is like the news and the media and all this stuff have a lot of agency, and they don't do the right thing with it oftentimes. And so by us here as a congregation doing this and declaring this, I think is also us putting our foot in that conversation of saying, hey, we got something to say. We want to do it the right way. Right. Everyone that's going to be on this show, I'm going to speak to camera here for a minute. Everyone who's going to be on this show, we really believe in, we support, we want to build them up. We love what they're doing, and we literally want to shine the light on them. And so we're going to do it, and we're going to have fun doing it too.
Well, not only fun, but it's also our responsibility.
Yeah.
Because if we're given this gift to help this movement towards oneness, then we need to be responsible in using it. Yeah. And so this will be really exciting and a lot to learn. And I'm sure our hearts will be touched and lifted at the same time.
And I'm going to give you credit for this one. This is something you said to me when I first met you, is having the ability to be stretched in your life. And that sticks with me, and I really like that. And that's something I think about is one of our goals too, is let's stretch ourselves, and then let's also stretch you, the viewer, in your experience too. So let's jump in. We got two great guests here. We'll jump into it. One of them in person, one of them on Zoom. And let's go for it.
Mary Ellen Kane and Lisa Catalan with the U.S. Federation. So welcome, and here we are, as is our first interview of Breakthrough, where we are engaging conversations to see the intersection of spirituality and justice, and you are our first guest. And
How honored I am.
Well, it's great to have you, Mary Ellen. So, Mary Ellen, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, right now, I am the executive director of the United States Federation of the Sisters of St. Joseph, which includes the 16 congregations of St. Joseph in the United States. And so we work a lot with the congregations, but we also have a global focus. I'm the chairperson of the board of our international center. I'm also represent the U.S. on the Global Coordinating Committee. I also work with our UN representative, Barbara Bozak and Marianne Senek, and also work with formation, particularly the initial formation of the novitiate, and our ongoing formation, which we call Transformation for Mission. And there are other little aspects in there too, but it's wonderful because it's all about relationships, and that's really the heart of our charism, so it's wonderful to do that.
Right, and we have that often shared expression, relationships are at the heart of who we are and who we're becoming. And first and foremost, that relationship with our God, the divine, higher power, however one would call. And what we want to hopefully do during these episodes is really to see is the need for justice in our world. But what is it that we, as part of the family of Joseph, how are we grounded, and what impels us and moves us towards works of justice? With your person as a Sister of St. Joseph and your work at the U.S. Federation, how is the spirituality being grounded in the work?
Well, when you look at our charism, when you think of our charism, it really is a call to justice, because we speak of our charism as uniting neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God. And when we read in the consensus statement, which I love, this is the consensus statement, which was put together by the Madai team when, after Vatican II, when we were told to go back to the spirit of our founders. We really didn't know what the spirit of our founders was, but a team was set up by the Federation to go back and look at our primitive documents, to go back to France, to go back to the archives, which were never really dealt with, and find out what was that original spirit. And they came up with this consensus statement. And the line that I love it is that the Sister of St. Joseph moves always towards profound love of God and love of neighbor without distinction, from whom she does not separate herself. And I think there are two really important words in there. Without distinction means there's not just no distinction between neighbors, certainly, but there's no distinction between the love of God and the love of neighbor. And we know, we read that in Scripture. You can't say you love God and not love your neighbor. They are without distinction. They are the same. And the other line that I love, it says, from whom she does not separate herself. And if we look at Catholic social teaching, one of the principles of Catholic social teaching is solidarity. Mm-hmm. And so that whole notion that we never separate ourselves from the neighbor. So we never separate ourselves from the neighbor's problems, the neighbor's needs. And when we talk of neighbor, our whole understanding of neighbor has grown through the centuries. You know, when our sisters first started in Le Puy, France, a tiny little town in France, they saw themselves as serving the neighbor. But the neighbor was the people who lived within walking distance of them. That was their neighbor. They couldn't go much further. And as our world has expanded, as our understanding of God has expanded, our notion of neighbor has expanded. So it's not just the dear neighbor who we see, but it's everyone and everything that lives on the earth, because the only real power that we have comes from our relationship. Mm-hmm. And the more relationships we have, the more power we have. And the more diverse our relationships, the more power we have. We can't just have relationships with those who look like us, think like us, come from the same place, have the same language or ethnicity. We have to have a broader range of relationships if we are really to have power that can act for the common good or the reign of God. In the public arena, we call it the common good. You know, sometimes we speak in church speak, and when we're in the public arena, we have to learn the language of the public arena, that will bring us all together to work for the common good.
And so often when you speak of power, it's the relational power, which really is, to put it in an image, it's more circular and
That's
it's more
right.
horizontal, that although we are different and unique, which we need, we are all, we have that same kind of power. And then how do I elicit the power within myself? And how do you help do that and to make it more reciprocal? And I think, you know, although our spirituality is distinct, we do come from a bit of a Ignatian tradition, with Jean-Pierre Madai being one of the founders with the 6 women, and that Ignatian spirituality to find God in all things. You know, because God is in all things, because God is the creator, the one of all, for all. And so to see the neighbor, or I like the way they say it in Spanish, el prójimo, or in the French, the prochain, is such beautiful expressions, as a reflection of God.
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do in the Federation, and we have been for a while, is to broaden our own tent. And for many years, well, the Federation was founded in 1966, after Vatican II, as I said. And at that time, the Federation was primarily composed of the leaders of the religious congregations. There were more congregations at that time, but it was pretty much the leadership, and they would meet annually, and that was the Federation. Then, over the years, the Federation grew to include the sisters, and we offered many, many programs for the sisters, primarily at the beginning to get in touch with the charism, because people really didn't know what the charism was. Charism is a gift that a person or a group of people, it kind of, you know, comes out of the word charisma. You know, somebody has a certain charisma. It kind of flows out of them and you see it. It's kind of a light that comes from them. Well, charism is like that. It's the special light or special focus of a group or a religious community. So, other groups have charisms. The Mercies, their charism is mercy. That's the thing that they focus their way to the gospel on. The Dominicans speak of truth. The Franciscans speak of peace. And Sisters of St. Joseph, we speak of love. All our charisms, all of the charisms are a part of God. They're all characteristics or attributes of God. And so we really want all of them, but we focus in or we grow out of one. We kind of, when I entered, we didn't know what the charism is or we didn't express it in any way. And when we read the documents and when I come to know them more deeply, I say, yeah, this was the right congregation for me. This is the charism I was called to. I didn't know that when I entered, but I do know that now. And I think for many of us, we've grown in that understanding of the charism, what it is. And so the charism, we don't own the charism. And the charism is bigger than the congregation of St. Joseph. We're all called to love. So we've tried to understand that and expand the membership in the Federation and say that the charism doesn't just belong to the sisters. The charism belongs to many other people, our associates, our agrégés, our partners in mission, people who work with us and for us, people we serve in parishes or schools or hospitals. Many of those people also reflect and love this charism.
So in its 50 plus years of existence, our U.S. Federation being very grounded and growing in the knowledge of our spirituality, right? When that team went over and our very own Sister Connie DeBias from the Brentwood congregation was very much a part of that.
Yes, very much so.
And so what do you think it was that for the Federation and the congregations in the Federation that, just getting to know our spirituality was not enough? So why did we sense that we needed to move to bring in our own JPIC coordinator, while other congregations pretty much have their own? But why is it important to have one for the Federation?
I think the Federation, we always talk about becoming more, acting more as one. And we talk about, taking inspiration from the scripture that all may be one. And although we all do our own individual things, we are trying to act more as one. Religious life is changing so dramatically and so quickly. And our numbers here in the U.S. are shrinking. And yet our younger people still have this great enthusiasm. When I say younger people, I mean our younger canonically vowed people, still have this great enthusiasm for mission and the charism. And they need to find that support with each other. And that is happening. And it has been happening over a past number of years. But we also see it happening with younger members who are not canonically vowed. Cristian has started a wonderful program called Charism in Motion. It's for canonical religious and others who are between the ages of 25 and 40, both sisters and lay people who have come together and are really, again, working on their spirituality, developing their spirituality, talking about the issues that matter to them, and hopefully will go forward and build more communities and that can act together. So it's happening on a lot of levels.
Well, and we shall continue to build and develop those relationships. So thanks again for coming on, Mary Ellen, and getting this all started. It's been wonderful to help everyone break through to see that active, inclusive love is still alive with great passion and self-emptying love in our world today.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you for inviting me.
What's up, Lisa? How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here for Breakthrough. You're on the first episode here of the show, and really happy to have you on. We were just with Sister Mary Ellen in the studio conversation there with Sister Joan. Really exciting. And now we get to hear from you a little bit. So tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Lisa Catalan, and I serve as the Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Coordinator for the U.S. Federation of the Sisters of St. Joseph, which is a really long title.
It's a long business card.
So it's a long business card. And I kind of like to describe it as it's the intersection of like community organizing and advocacy and doing educational programming. I'm actually based for the Federation remotely. I live in Wisconsin, but I work nationally with our congregations and provinces throughout the country. So that's close to 3,000 sisters and 3,000 associates across the country.
Wow, that's exciting. That's a really unique aspect of your role is that you work remotely, you're organizing, and you're connecting. I mean, I feel like I hear from you all the time. I don't feel in a good way. I don't feel because I'm one of those people that needs to be connected with you, and in today's day and age with the remote work and all this stuff, it seems like you're in this type of position where your ability to organize the way you do is really fruitful for the work that needs to be done. And I don't know, like 10 years ago, what we would have looked like, what this all would have looked like, right? It's pretty fascinating to see how things evolve. Now, what's your background? In general? I'm just kind of curious there.
Yeah, so I've studied both Spanish and theology in my educational career. And so I would say more than anything, though, I've been formed by like cross-cultural and international experiences. I studied abroad for a semester in El Salvador in college. And
wow.
so, yeah, so that time in Central America, I think really formed me and also informed my viewpoint. And it's been interesting as I've met with sisters over the past 2 years in this role, there's a lot of connections to Latin America. So that's been a really cool aspect of the job is to see where those touchstones are. And I got a Master of Divinity degree, which is a professional ministerial degree in California at the Jesuit School of Theology. And the other fun connecting point with the Sisters of St. Joseph and the charism is that I was a St. Joseph worker over 10 years ago, which is very wild to believe.
It's helpful to get the building blocks of who you are in your journey, because that's really, the point of this show is to talk about the way that we engage spirituality and justice. And as Sister Joan was saying earlier, you can't have one without the other. And it's very often we can kind of look at justice as this activity, but there needs to be a foundation of spirituality, which, your experience as El Salvador and then Joseph Worker Program, it feels like I'm getting the sense that you have that, especially El Salvador, which is interesting because, that's such a justice and spiritual space. I mean, so much injustice. And, I think of Oscar Romero and whatnot. And so I'm sure that had a huge impact on your spiritual life, even before you realized you were going to do justice work.
Yeah, it did. I think it was really powerful the program. One of the main components of the program that I did was to have the reality of El Salvador and the people of El Salvador, El Pueblo, be the primary educators. And so that meant 2 days a week. I was in a rural community, accompanying a family and a community there, just kind of paying attention to the injustices, as you mentioned. And I think allowing, without a spiritual component of that program, in addition to coursework, I think it would have been a really hard thing to process or to kind of grapple with, because there is this, in the face of so much suffering and, social sin, how do we respond? So the spirituality component was really foundational for me there. And like Sister Joan said, you can't have one without the other. There has to be both the political and social analysis, the reflection, and I think the community component that spirituality can bring, that shared reflection, shared prayer, shared struggling together. I feel like that's a really powerful piece of it too.
Yeah, I'm glad you're going this route, because this is what I wanted to ask you next, was because it's something that I think about in my own journey of how do we have that balance where we're feeding our spirit and we're growing, but we're not getting super depressed all the time, because it's very easy to get really depressed.
Down the rabbit hole. Yep.
Yeah. So what do you find in your own journey, without, you don't have to get too personal, but where do you find hope in the opportunities to engage those two worlds and grow in that way? Yeah. What does it look like for you?
Yeah, so there's a couple of, I would say, different things. One is a real groundedness in kind of the sense that God is bigger than all of it. And I think that doesn't free me from my responsibilities to act, but it's trusting that we are not God.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important place to start from. In terms of what kind of keeps me grounded or keeps me hopeful, I think being in nature is super important for me, whether it's like listening to birds in my backyard or being by water, anything like that. That is a really, again, a reminder that God is the God of all creation.
Yeah.
And that really sustains me, I think, in a lot of ways. And I would say too, I find a lot of hope in kind of the like cloud of witnesses, whether living or dead. So you mentioned St. Oscar Romero. I think his witness was profound. And so it's being able to interact and kind of call on those saints, whether they're canonized as such, to really be models for how we engage. I also find a lot of inspiration from like a lot of secular leaders and folks who are like in activism spaces and like doing up to good trouble.
Yeah.
I'm really inspired by them, especially like younger folks. And I don't know, there's a lot of inspiring people if you just kind of look around.
Talking about how you do this work with the Federation and connecting with colleagues all over, what's something that really excites you about this work that maybe, because I found, so I'm still really new in this world and whatnot. And, I have a lot of friends in different places and they're all kind of like, what are you doing? What is this? And it's exciting to explain it to them because a lot of them want to help and want to be more aware, but they don't know how to. And so I felt that I have certain people in my life who will kind of use me to help them grow and say, wait, I saw this thing. The Pope said something the other day. What does that mean, Christian? Help me out here. So what's that been like for you in your journey?
I think one thing that is really interesting is it does feel like we're at a precipice. We're at a precipice globally, and really probably past the precipice for the climate crisis.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of what feels really like apocalyptic things happening in our world and things that are decisions that are made by people in power. And so one of the things I really appreciate about this sphere is it feels like it's an opportunity for sisters, for associates, for partners in mission to claim their power and like claim their prophetic authority by virtue of their baptism, to really say like we have to both denounce what is unjust and what breaks God's heart, and we also have to announce like a different way of proceeding. And I think historically, at least in the United States, women religious have really been primary bearers of that prophetic witness. And so it feels like important that lay partners are now coming alongside in a more concerted way to really continue that. And it's going to look different and it's hard. And there's questions about how, like, the reality is no one owns the charism. Like charism is the spirit. And so how is the spirit animating us? And that's a space of discernment, I think. So it feels like there's not a lot of answers always.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a lot of questions. But it feels like it matters that these questions are being asked.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, is to come right up to the gate and say right away, we may not figure out answers the way we hope to. And like the results are not, and it's tough because we live in a world where everything is really quantified and success is measured in this way. And like, especially with social media, which I think is messing with a lot of our brains with how we have relationships, but also how we measure success and this or that. And we're forgetting that, like, I always think of it like, we look at like something and say, oh, this got this much interaction, or this email got opened up this many times, or what that. It's like, well, years and years and years ago, if you were just in a room in community with people, you'd be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
Like what happened, so I think we have to remember that some answers are not what we're going to expect, and it's just the experience, and it's the fact that we have to be asking them the questions. We have to be doing the work. You mentioned, things that inspire you in nature and different leaders, organized leaders. I love that you said non-religious. I think that's important because I think one of the things that we have to do within the charism and within the Joseph family is never stop looking outward and inward. Did you know to do that when you started, or was that like a natural inspiration, or did you figure out, holy cow, if I don't do that, I'm going to be always on the outside?
Yeah, I think it's been an evolution over time, both previous to my work with the Federation and now. I think part of it is just kind of maturing and realizing the world is really, really big. And like, thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that has been part of it. The other piece too, I would say is, there's this piece of social media or access to information. I can learn about what's going on with an activist in India or in the Amazon. And like, it's okay that I'm not in close proximity geographically, but that's going to impact me.
Yeah.
So I actually think those stories have been really powerful. In terms of like outreach to other organizations or kind of community organizing broadly, I wouldn't say I'm like a full-blown community organizer by any means. I don't have that necessary credential, but some of the tactics of community organizing are really important to me, including one-to-ones. And that was something that was introduced to me as a St. Joseph worker, actually. So like that was a practice we were required to do every month. And so that has really been an essential skill for me relationally since kind of for 10 years. And so that's a really important component of my work. And I think it's also very much rooted in, my training in spiritual direction and pastoral care it's that deep listening and paying attention.
I think that's really a wonderful piece of advice for people that could be tuned into this. And I appreciate you sharing that. Well, thanks for being here, Lisa, and being part of this, our first episode of Breakthrough. It was an honor to have you on here. And Sister Joan and I were so excited when we were able to put this together and say, this is like our breakthrough episode of Breakthrough. And so really grateful to have you here.
Glad to be here and grateful to continue in the good work.
I couldn't think of two better people to start with. I mean, Mary Ellen, really just being so grounded in our spirituality and how it, sets us in the direction of just ways. And Lisa has really, in her just a little over 2 years, maybe, with our federation, has brought such energy and hope. And I know that our own JPIC coordinators in the various congregations find her a great support.
The two of them play a really important role, and that's why I wanted to have them on here first, because they are like the true north, so to speak, in a lot of different ways. And I know when I first started here, I had met both of them very briefly beforehand through my work at St. Joseph's University and such. But I remember when I first started being in my mind, I need to connect with the two of them and kind of figure out what they're doing, what's going on, because it's very helpful. And I've found that to be true for a lot of people. So it's really wonderful to have them, and this is kind of a high bar to set for the first one. But we're ready. We're up for the challenge.
The rest will be just as great,
right?
and different, and which they should be.
Yeah. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you soon for episode 2. And we wish you the best.
We just remember all is one.
All is one.